Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another reading from Paradise Found by William F. Warren, and today we're going to be reading from Part 5, Chapter 4, The Navel of the Earth. He is the God who sits in the center, on the navel of the earth, and he is the interpreter of religion to all mankind. Plato. But at the navel of the earth stands Agni, clothed in richest apparel. Rig Veda. To whom then will ye liken God? It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers. Isaiah. After proceeding some distance, we paused to take breath, where the crowd was more dense and obstinate than usual, and I was seriously informed that this was the exact navel of the earth, and that these obstinate pilgrims were bowing and kissing it. The Land and the Book. Jedes Volk hat einen Navel der Erde. Quaker. And that means every people has a navel of the earth. Students of antiquity must often have marveled that in nearly every ancient literature they should encounter the strange expression, the navel of the earth. Still more unaccountable would it have seemed to them had they noticed how many ancient mythologies connect the cradle of the human race with this earth navel. The advocates of the different sites which have been assigned to Eden have seldom, if ever, recognized the fact that no hypothesis on this subject can be considered acceptable which cannot account for this peculiar association of man's first home with some sort of natural center of the earth. Assuming, however, that the human race began its history at the pole, and that all traditional recollections of man's unfallen state were connected with a polar Eden, the mystery which otherwise envelops the subject immediately vanishes. We have already seen that the term navel was anciently used in many languages for center, and that the pole, or central point of the revolving constellations, was the navel of heaven. But as to the celestial pole there corresponds a terrestrial one, so it is only natural that to the term the navel of heaven there should be the corresponding expression, the navel of the earth. Beginning with Christian traditions, let us make a pilgrimage to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre at Jerusalem. There, in the portion belonging to the Greek Christians, we shall discover a round pillar, some 2 feet high, projecting from the marble pavement, but supporting nothing. If we inquire as to its purpose, we shall be informed that it is designed to mark the exact center or navel of the earth. Early pilgrims and chroniclers refer to this curious monument, but its antiquity no one knows. As usually described, it is a monument of the geographical ignorance of those who placed it there, a proof that they supposed the edge of the flat disk of the earth to be everywhere equidistant from this stone. In reality, it is a monument of primeval astronomic and geographic science. To find the true symbolical and commemorative character of this pillar, we need to remind ourselves of a tendency ever present and active among men. We have already alluded to the scores of Calvaries, which have been set apart in Roman Catholic lands and hallowed as memorial mounts. Up the side of each leads a Via Dolorosa with its different stations, each recalling to the mind, by sculptured reliefs or otherwise, one of the immortal incidents of the Passion. On the summit is the full crucifixion tableau, the Savior hanging aloft upon the cross, between 2 crucified malefactors. The spear, the reed with the sponge, the hammer, all are there, sometimes the ladder also, and near by the tomb wherein never man was laid. In the minds of the worshippers, it is a holy place. Even in our Protestant republic on the shore of Lake Chautauqua, we have seen variously carried out in our own day a complete reproduction of Palestine. Thousands have visited it to take object lessons in sacred geography. From it, these thousands have gained clearer ideas of the relative positions and bearings of Hermon and Tabor and Olivet, of Kedron and Cherith and the Jordan, of Nazareth and Hebron and the Holy City, than else they ever would have had. What here has been done for purposes of instruction has elsewhere, and often upon a greater or smaller scale, been done for purposes of direct religious edification, and for the gratification of religious sentiment. Now, just as Christians love to localize in their own midst their holy places, so the early nations of the world loved to create miniature reproductions of Eden, the fair and sacred country in which man dwelt in the holy morning hours of his existence. The traditional temple architecture of many early religions was determined by this symbolical and commemorative motive. This was eminently true of the sacred architecture of the Babylonians, Egyptians, Hebrews, and Chinese. Capon assures us that every orthodoxly constructed Buddhist temple either is or contains a symbolical representation of the divine regions of Meru and of the heaven of the gods, saints, and Buddhas rising above it, Lilly says. The 13 pyramidal layers at the top of every temple in Nepal represents the 13 unchangeable heavens of Amitabha. With what astonishing elaboration this idea has sometimes been carried out may be seen in the Senbyu temple in Mengun, near the capital of Burma. That the natural features of the landscape were often utilized in producing these symbolic shrines and holy places is only what we should expect. The Buddhists of Ceylon, as Aubrey states, have endeavored to transform their central mountain, Devakuta, Peak of the Gods, into Meru, and to find 4 streams descending from its sides to correspond with the rivers of their paradise. Again, in the rock-cut temples of Ellora, we have, in like manner, a complete representation of the paradise of Siva. Faber develops the evidence of this practice among the ancients with great fullness, and with respect to the Hindus and Buddhists says, each pagoda, each pyramid, each montiform high place is invariably esteemed to be a copy of the holy hill Meru, the Hindu's paradise. From Records of the Past, Volume 10, page 50, we see that the Egyptians had the same custom of building temples in such a manner that they should be symbolical of the abode of the gods. So in Greece and Rome, the citadel mounts in their cities had quite as great religious as military significance. Lenormant, speaking of Rome and Olympia, remarks, "It is impossible not to note that the Capitoline was first of all the mount of Saturn, and that the Roman archaeologists established a complete affinity between the Capitoline and Mount Kronios in Olympia, from the standpoint of their traditions and religious origin. This Mount Kronios is, as it were, the omphalos of the sacred city of Elis, the primitive center of its worship. It sometimes receives the name Olympus. Here is not only symbolism in general, but also a symbolism pointing to the Arctic Eden, already shown to be the primeval mount of Kronos, the omphalos of the whole earth." Now, as Jerusalem is one of the most ancient and of the sacred cities of the world, and at the same time the one where the tradition of the primeval paradise was preserved in its clearest and most historic form, it would be strange if, in all its long history, no king or priesthood had ever tried to enhance its attractiveness and sanctity by making it, or some part of it, symbolize Earth's earliest holy land, and commemorate man's earliest theocracy. That the attempt was made is beyond a doubt. To this day, the visitor is shown the spot where, according to one tradition, Adam was created. Not many feet away, under the custody of another religion, he finds the sacred rock-hewn grave in which at least the head of the first of men was buried. In the Little Gihon, the name of one of the Paradise rivers still lives. The miraculous virtue of the pool of Bethsaida was ascribed in early Christian legend to its being in subterranean contact with the tree of life, which grew in the midst of paradise. Christ's cross was said to have been made of the wood of the same tree. The very name, Mount Zion, is a memorial one. The Talmudic account of the strength of the hill of Zion shows that the Palestinian mount was named after the heavenly one, and not vice versa, as commonly supposed. The true sacred name of the holy city is, therefore, not Sion, though it is often called by the heavenly appellation also, but daughter of Sion. She is simply a copy, a miniature likeness, of the true mount and city of God in the sides of the north. So confident is Lenormant that Solomon and Hezekiah intentionally conformed their capital to the paradisaic mount, and intentionally introduced in their public works features which should symbolize and commemorate peculiarities of Eden, that he uses the fact as an unanswerable argument against these imaginative critics who would place the composition of the second chapter of Genesis subsequent to the Babylonian exile. He says, "Another proof, and a very decisive one in my opinion, of the high antiquity of the narrative of Genesis concerning Eden, and of the knowledge of it possessed by the Hebrews long before the captivity, is the intention, so clearly proved by Eswald." Well, you can tell that I'm moving and a box just collapsed. Anyway, to imitate the 4 rivers which predominated in the works of Solomon and Hezekiah for the distribution of the waters of Jerusalem, which in its turn was considered as the umbilicus of the earth, from Ezekiel verse 5, in the double sense of center of the inhabited regions and source of the rivers. The 4 rivers which watered the town and the foot of its ramparts, one of which was named Gihon, like one of the paradisaic rivers, were, as Ewald has shown, reputed to issue through subterranean communications from the spring of fresh water situated beneath the temple, the sacred source of life and purity to which the prophets attach a highly symbolic value. In this citation, in addition to a strong assertion of the symbolical character of the topography and waterworks of Jerusalem, we have the location itself included in this symbolism. The city is said to have been the umbilicus or navel of the earth for 2 reasons. First, because of its relation to surrounding countries, and second, because of its containing the source of the rivers. In our next chapter, this last reason will become more significant than even the writer intended. At present, we will only add that the true philosophy of the symbolical centrality of Jerusalem is found in 2 facts. First, the Hebrews had a tradition that primeval Eden was the center of the earth. And second, by styling Jerusalem the navel of the earth, as they did, it was symbolically all the more assimilated to the primitive paradise, which in so many other ways it sacredly commemorated. Passing to the field of Hellenic tradition, we are told by all modern interpreters that the Greeks shared the narrow conceit and ignorance of all ancient nations, and supposed their own land to occupy the middle of the flat earth disk. And because of certain expressions in Pindar and a passage in Pausanias, it is affirmed as a first principle in the geography of the ancient Greeks that Delphi was believed to be the exact topographical center point of the whole earth. Such a representation is far from satisfactory, for while the term omphalos of the earth was undoubtedly applied in a sense to Delphi, it belonged to it only as the name Athens belongs to many a town thus designated in America. It had other and older topographical connections and associations. We find traces of the same title in connection with Olympus, with Ida, with Parnassus, with Ogygia, with Nysa, with Mount Meros, with Delos, with Athens, with Crete, and even with Meroe. In the multiplicity of these localizations, the people seem to have lost the clue to the original significance of the conception, and to have contrived crude etymological myths of their own for the explanation of what seemed to them a remarkable designation. The moment we make the true original omphalos of the earth the North Pole, and invest it with sacred traditionary recollections of Eden life, all this confusion becomes clear. The center stone of Delphi, like the omphalium of the Cretans, becomes merely a memorial shrine, an attempted copy of the great original. And if all the Olymps and Idas and Parnassus mounts were alike convenient reproductions and localizations of the one celestial mountain of the gods at the North Pole, what wonder if we find each of them in some way designated as the center of the earth? Homer's Omphalos of the Sea, Calypso's Isle, has in like manner all the marks of a mythico-traditional North Polar Eden. Its name, Ogygia, connects it with a far-off antediluvian antiquity. It is situated in the far north, and Odysseus needs the blast of Boreas to bring him away from its shores on the homeward journey. Its queen, Calypso, is the daughter of Atlas, and Atlas's proper station in Greek mythology, as elsewhere shown, is at the terrestrial pole. Its beauty is paradisaic, it being adorned with groves and soft meadows of violets, so beautiful, in fact, that on beholding it even an immortal would be seized with wonder and delight. Finally, identifying the place beyond all question, we have the Eden fountain, whose waters part into 4 streams, flowing each in opposite direction. In Mount Meros, we have only the Greek form of Meru, as long ago shown by Kreutzer. The one is the navel of the earth for the same reason that the other is. Egyptian Meroe, in some Egyptian texts Mer, in Assyrian Meruk or Meruka, the seat of the famous oracle of Jupiter, Ammon, was possibly named from the same world mountain. This would explain the passage in Quintus Curtius, which has so troubled commentators, wherein the object which represented the divine being is described as resembling a navel set in gems. When the 2 doves of Zeus, flying from the 2 opposite ends of the world, determine the cosmic centralness of Parnassus, it is of an antediluvian Parnassus that the myth is speaking. It is that mount on whose polar top we have already found the domicilium of Zeus. Nonnos, in describing the symbolical peplos which Harmonia wove on the loom of Athena, says, "First she represented the earth with its omphalos in the center. Around the earth she spread out the sphere of heaven, varied with the figures of the stars. Lastly, along the exterior edge of the well-woven vestment she represented the ocean in a circle. That Delphi or the Phocian Parnassus is the omphalos here mentioned is far enough from credible. It is the pole, and the manner in which the term is introduced shows that it was perfectly understood by every reader and needed no explanation. The true shrine of Apollo was not at Delphi, but in that older earth center of which Plato speaks in the motto prefix to this section. His real home is among the Hyperboreans, in a land of almost perpetual light, and it is only upon annual visits that he comes to Delphi. The remembrance of this fact would have helped the interpreters of Pindar out of more than one perplexity. According to Hecataeus, Leto, the mother of Apollo and his sister Artemis, was born on an island in the Arctic Ocean, beyond the north wind. Moreover, on this island inhabited by the Hyperboreans, Apollo is unceasingly worshipped in a huge round temple, in a city whose inhabitants are perpetually playing upon lyres and chanting to his praise. So reports Diodorus, and herewith agrees the imaginary journey of Apollonius of Tyana, a namesake of Apollo, who tells of his journey far to the north of the Caucasus, into the regions of the pious Hyperboreans, among whom he found a lofty sacred mountain, the omphalos of the earth. In the Phaedo, we have a charming description of Plato's terrestrial paradise. In this fair region, Socrates is made to say, all things that grow, trees and flowers and fruit, are fairer than any here. And there are hills and stones in them smoother and more transparent and fairer in color than our highly valued emeralds and sardonyxes and jaspers and other gems, which are but minute fragments of them. For there all the stones are like our precious stones, and fairer still. The temperament of their seasons is such that the inhabitants have no disease, and live much longer than we do, and have sight and hearing and smell and all the other senses in much greater perfection. And they have temples and sacred places in which the gods really dwell, and they hear their voices and receive their answers, and are conscious of them, and hold converse with them, and they see the sun, the moon, and the stars as they really are. If we ask as to the location of this divinely beautiful abode, every indication of the text agrees with our hypothesis. It is right under the eye when the world is looked at from its summit, the northern celestial pole. Viewed from the standpoint of Greece and its neighbor lands, it is above. It is the upper earth, the dazzling top of the round world. In it, moreover, is the navel of the earth, inhabited by happy men. If anything is needed to disprove the common notion that geographical ignorance and national self-esteem first governed the ancient peoples in locating in their own countries navels of the earth, it is furnished by what is in all probability the oldest epic in the world, that of Idzubar, fragments of which have survived in the oldest literature of Babylonia. These fragments show that the earliest inhabitants of the Tigris-Euphrates basin located the center of the earth not in their own midst, but in a far-off land of sacred associations, where the holy house of the gods is situated, a land into the heart whereof man hath not penetrated, a place underneath the overshadowing world tree, and beside the full waters. No description could more perfectly identify this spot with the Arctic pole of ancient Asiatic mythology. Yet this testimony stands not alone, for in the fragment of another ancient text, translated by Sayce in Records of the Past, we are told of a dwelling which the gods created for the first human beings, a dwelling in which they became great and increased in numbers, and the location of which is described in words exactly corresponding to those of Iranian, Indian, Chinese, Eddaic, and Aztec literature, namely, in the center of the earth. In the Hindu Puranas, we are told over and over that the earth is a sphere, and that Mount Meru is its navel or pole. But the expression Nabi, or navel of the earth, is older than the Puranas. Though the very meaning of Purana is ancient, like the term navel of heaven, it occurs in the hymns of the earliest Veda. But where was the sacred shrine to which it was applied? It was no holy place in Bactria or in the Punjab. Nothing tends to locate it in India. On the other hand, the 5th verse of the 185th hymn, Mandala 1st, of the Rig Veda seems most plainly to fix it at the North Pole. In this verse, night and day are represented as twin sisters in the bosom of their parents, heaven and earth, each bounding or limiting the other, but both kissing simultaneously the Nabi of the earth. Now, everywhere upon earth, except in the polar regions, night and day seem ever to be pursuing and supplanting each other. They have no common ground. At the pole, and only there, they may be said, with locked arms, to spin round and round a common point, and unitedly to kiss it from the opposite sides. This plainly is the meaning of the poet, and remembering all the legendary splendors of the polar mountain, around which sun and moon are ever moving, we must pronounce the figure as beautiful as it is instructive. In perfect accord herewith, we find the bard asking, in another hymn, where the navel of the earth is, and in doing it he associates it as closely as possible, not with some central home shrine in his own land, but with the extreme end of the earth, an expression used again and again in ancient languages for the pole and its vicinity. Again, in another Vedic passage, the navel of the earth is located upon the mountains, and this association points us to the north. Still stronger evidence of its polar location is found in other hymns, where the supporting column of heaven, the Atlas pillar of Vedic cosmology, is described as standing in or upon the navel of the earth. Finally, so unmistakable is the Vedic teaching on this subject that a recent writer, after asserting with all his teachers that the cosmography of the Vedic bards was embryonic and their earth a flat disk overarched by a solid firmament which was soldered on to the edge of the disk at the horizon, nevertheless later, in studying one of the cosmogonical hymns of Durgatimus, the son of Mamata, reaches the conclusion that the singer had knowledge both of the celestial and of the terrestrial pole, and that in seeking to answer the question as to the birthplace of humanity, he locates it precisely at the point of contact between the polar mountain and the pole of the northern sky. We have seen that, according to old Iranian tradition also, man was created in the central division of the earth. The primordial tree, which kept the strength of all kinds of trees, was in the vicinity of the middle of the earth. The primeval ox, which stood by the Paradise River when the destroyer came, was in the middle of the earth. Mount Terra, the celestial pole, and Kakad-e-Datik, the mountain of the terrestrial pole, are each described in similar terms, the one as center of the world, the other as center of the earth. The expression Apamnapat, the navel of the waters, occurs in the Avestan writings again and again, and is always applied either to the world fountain from which all waters proceed, or to the spirit presiding over it. But as this world fountain, Ardvisura, is located in the North Polar sky, we have here also a recognition of a world Omphalos, inseparable from the ancient and sacred Paradise Mountain at the pole. The Chinese terrestrial paradise is described not only as at the center of the earth, but also as directly under Shang-Ti's heavenly palace, which is declared to be in the North Star, and which is sometimes styled Palace of the Center. Very probably the historic designation, the Middle Kingdom, was originally a sacred name, commemorative of that primeval middle country which the Akkadian called Akkad, the Indian Ilavrita, the Iranian Kavaneris, and the Northman Idavolar. In the funeral rites of China, this supposition finds a cogent confirmation. Passing to Japan, it is curiously interesting to note that the Ainos, who are supposed to have been the first inhabitants, are believed to have come into the archipelago from the north, that their heaven is on inaccessible mountain tops in the same quarter, and that their name, according to some authorities, etymologically signifies offspring of the center. In burial, their dead are always so placed that when resurrected their faces will be set toward the lofty northern country, from which their ancestors are believed to have come, and to which their spirits are believed to have returned. Taking these facts in connection with those presented in Chapter 2 of the preceding part, one can hardly evade the conclusion that, when Griffiths informs us that the Japanese considered their country as lying at the top of the world, and when others say that the Japanese once regarded their country as the center of the world, it is most probable that these writers have applied to the Japan of today ideas which originally belonged to a far distant prehistoric polar Japan, the primitive seat of the race, as it has lived on in these most ancient traditions of the Ainos. In Scandinavian mythology, we meet with a similar idea. In the Eddas, both Asgard and Idavolar are represented as in the center of the world, and at least one author, in explaining the reason of it, has come within a hair's breadth of the truth, though missing it. The ancient Mexicans conceived of the cradle of the human race as situated in the farthest north, upon the highest of mountains, cloud surrounded, the residence of the god Tlaloc. Thence comes the rain and all streams, for Tlaloc is the god of water. The first man, Quetzalcoatl, after having ruled as king of the Golden Age in Mexico, returned by divine direction to the primeval paradise in the north, and partook of the draught of immortality. The stupendous terraced pyramid temple in Cholula was a copy and symbol of the sacred Paradise Mountain of Aztec tradition, which was described as standing in the center of the middle country. Some of the Mexican myths represent the mountain as now crooked, or turned partly over. For the true explanation of this, see above. Among the ancient Inca subjects of Peru was found the same idea of a navel of the earth, and even among the Chickasaws of Mississippi. Thus is all ancient thought full of this legendary idea of a mysterious, primeval, holy, paradisaic earth center, a spot connected as is no other with the center of heaven, the paradise of God. Why it should be so no one ever has told us, but the hypothesis which places the biblical Eden at the pole and makes all later earth navels commemorative of that primal one affords a perfect explanation. In the light of it, there is no difficulty in understanding that earth center in Jerusalem with which we began. The inconspicuous pillar in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre symbolizes and commemorates far more than the geographical ignorance of medieval ages. It stands for the Japanese pillar by which the first soul born upon earth mounted to the sky. It stands for the world column of the East Aryans and the Chinvat Bridge of Iran. It stands for the law-proclaiming pillar of Orichalcum in Atlantis, placed in the center of the most central land. It stands for that Talmudic pillar, by means of which the tenants of the terrestrial paradise mount to the celestial, and having spent the Sabbath, return to pass the week below. It symbolizes Cardo, Atlas, Meru, Harabarazeti, Karzak Kora, every fabulous mountain on whose top the sky pivots itself, and around which all the heavenly bodies ceaselessly revolve. It perpetuates a religious symbolism which existed in its region before ever Jerusalem had been made the Hebrew capital, recalling to our modern world the Tabor Haaretz of a period anterior to the days of Samuel. In tradition, it is said to mark the precise spot whence the clay was taken, out of which the body of Adam was modeled. It does so, but it does it in a language and method which were common to all the most ancient nations of the earth. It points not to the soil in which it stands, but to the holier soil of a faraway primitive Eden. That is the end of today's chapter. I hope that you enjoyed it despite the excitement of one of my boxes collapsing in my kitchen. Anyway, I hope to get another video from this book out next week, if not the following week. And that's it for today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to support my channel, I will leave a link in the description for my YouTube membership, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.